Okay, today, talking about two things. I've been given two opportunities here in one go. One of them is just to talk a bit about my background, my family, where I come from, and then also to talk about how God got hold of my life, and just to tell you about a little bit about a struggle that I've had, is getting my head around who is the Father, who is the Son, and who is the Holy Ghost. Now, you can see that I'm a little bit around that 68 years old because I call our person the Holy Ghost. But anyway, there's a whole story about that, but don't worry about it. It's all good. So, I'll just get myself organised. Who's got their paper Bibles? Good team. Who's got their electronic Bibles? Okay, they're all allowable. That's good. Okay, I've got a little toy here. Just got to put this on, just for a second. Just to hear that. You hear that? Yeah. Hang on. Oop, more. Ooh, a few more. Okay, I'll come back to that. Some of you may know what it is. Others may not. Okay, flick on to the next one. So, that's me, 9 months old. Apparently I was real cute. And just to brag a little bit more, I was won quite a number of baby competitions apparently. I got, as I grew a bit older, I got involved in television, mainly in commercials but also in movies, because I was cute apparently. I was one of the first Weet-Bix kids on television, okay, just to let you know. So I have a long background in television and films and photography and stuff like that, but that's a completely different story. But on to the next one. Enough of that. Okay, that's my family unit. Got on the retro, black and white, so you know it's old. That's my father and my mother. My father's Fred, my mother is Trish. My elder brother on that side is Tony. One in the middle is Bruce, and I'm the young fella on there. So I'm the baby of the family. And I'm about 8 years old, 8 or 9 years old there. So the story relates around about that. Now, my father was a military person. I come from a military family. Navy is the part of the Defence Forces that he was with. It was a lifetime for him. It was a way out of his particular mess that he was in when he was youth, but I won't go into that, it's another story. So he spent 35 years in the Navy. He joined as a 14-year-old ship's boy. So they normally, even back in those days, you couldn't join the Navy at 14 years old, but because of family circumstance, his father signed him over to the Navy. So got all the paperwork on that as well, it's quite interesting. So he grew up basically in the Navy. He was had a distinguished military service. He became one of the very few people, he's quite well known in the Royal New Zealand Navy. I'm originally a Kiwi, excuse me, but it's all right. It's only across the ditch. During the Second World War, he was decorated for his war service on the ship. That's another story again. My mother was involved in the military war office, so she was in the top secret part of military service, and I still don't know a lot about what she did, but it was involving communications, the Blexley Park type thing, if you know what Blexley Park's about. So that's what she was involved in. We all grew up as a reasonably happy family. My mother was a reasonably developed Anglican, so forgive me, but I am an Anglican from birth. And my father was a master of discipline, come in 35 years in the Navy. He was a master discipline, and I'm a reflection of that, for better or for worse. But I'm fairly disciplined sort of most of the time, not all the time, as my wife would tell me. But he was a fair and tough discipline person. He was fair to us, but he was tough. I still have some stripes where I needed strong discipline, and I still believe in the spoon and all sorts of things like that. But anyway, It's not politic today, but anyway, we'll get there. But he was like the Roman soldier. Okay, he knew and understood rank, and he understood who was above him and that he had to obey them, and he had people below him who had to obey him. So he was that type of person. So if I come across a little bit abrupt sometimes, that's because of my upbringing. So excuse me for that. But anyway, as I said, I was brought up in the Anglican Church, went to Sunday school, was confirmed at 13. Now guys, Sunday school is an important thing, okay? For life. For life. It really is. Right? All your mums and dads here, your kids for life. Bring them up in the admonition of the Lord, please. Because even though you might drift away at some stage, you may not, one hopes, and you never do, but you always come back to your roots. Give them good, solid roots. Sunday school is so important. I had a ball at Sunday school. My vivid memories from age 5 going forward, Sunday school. Had some brilliant people there, really great, who loved the Lord. I'll rattle through a little bit about me because I want to get on to really the other bit that I want to talk to you about. I played rugby union at school, so whether you're into any other code, I don't know, but I played rugby union at school, did very well, and got into scuba diving when I was 16, so I enjoyed going underneath the water. Actually introduced Karinka to it too, she's a qualified diver. I joined New Zealand Government Fish Research Organisation, commonly called Fisheries. During that time I went to university, studied microbiology. So I'm a microbiologist, but I'm a marine microbiologist. That was my area that I got into. I was involved in shellfish farming, doing oysters and mussels, shellfish farming, developing that industry from a science point of view, and also studying, I don't know, anyone a Kiwi here? Got it. Ah, come on. I'll have to have a talk to you afterwards. Well, you may know the shellfish, the toaroa and the tuatua. Yes, well, I did all the study work on the toaroa shellfish in the North Island of New Zealand. Yes, I did. I had that power. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. But beautiful shellfish. Got into that. And during that time, I was very fortunate. I was chosen within the New Zealand government to go and get specialist diving training with the New Zealand Navy. So I actually joined my father's Navy. Now, my father's Navy was something that he would have dearly loved to get me into, the military background, to continue on it, but I wasn't disciplined enough. I didn't react to authority really that well that was above me. I always made the difference, made the argument, and tried to have a good discussion about it. Now, you can't do that in the military. Okay? You just can't do it. So the military is not a place for me. But anyway, I enjoyed my time that I was in there. I was in there for a number of different things, but that's another story. After that, I got into advertising in New Zealand. Had my own advertising business over there after I got out of the government. I came over with Karinka here in 1988 to Australia and did a little bit more advertising there, and then finally got into real estate, which is where I am today, and sort of trying to retire out of real estate but not quite succeeding yet. Anyway, that's basically the brief history of me. So it gives you a bit of a rattle on as to what I have, what I've done, and what I'm standing here, you out. So anyway, that's just the brief history. But let me take you back to when I was that age. That's when God got hold of me. Not to any particular time, specific time, but at around about age 8, tending towards 9, so late 8, he took me outside one day. Now, a lot of us don't do this, but he took me outside one day and he said, lie down, talking to me, clear as day, as I am talking to you here. And he said, just lie down on the ground. So I lay down on the ground. He said, look up. Now, a lot of us don't look up. But he got me to sit on the ground and look up. And he said, get to know my backyard. So I said, oh, that's very interesting. So, okay. So over a period of age 9, I've got a telescope, got into looking at the stars. Now, the stars already intrigued me. Now, a lot of people won't agree with the time base that I'm going to talk about, but I'm talking about what the current worldly time base is of what God's universe and backyard really is all about. So I'm going to take you on a quick whiz through the universe. We're going to travel many light years, in fact billions of light years from the time base that I'm using, and then whiz you back to the Earth, and then go into Rowley's territory, talk a little bit about rocks and a few other bits and pieces, and then dive a little bit further into there. So, on to the next slide. Okay. It's actually hard to get a decent view of the Earth with Australia in it. They all, they all seem to be the USA or other things. But anyway, that there, you can see Australia just coming into sunset on the east coast that's going around, because the Earth basically is travelling that direction. It's quite interesting, the Earth. At one stage people thought it was flat. It's not. It's a round ball. Not quite circular, just slightly off circular. And what we actually see there is very lovely cloud shapes, lovely shading of the Earth, seen right around the whole Western Hemisphere. It's just lovely, great shape. But anyway, that's the Earth. We live on that. That's our little vehicle, if you like, through the firmament that you'll read in the Bible. Okay. Now, I think I covered most of that. Yep, got all that. Okay. So what I'm going to talk to you about is just a very thin slither of what God is about. The biggest thing that I've found difficulty with in my travel with the Lord is to find out what the Father is about, what the Son of God is about, and what the Holy Spirit is about. So basically what our triune God is really all about. Now I talk to a lot of people, and a lot of people get fuzzy on this sort of thing, not really knowing what the Father is, what the Son is, what the Holy Spirit is, how the three of them work together, how the three are independent, but they work together. They are one. It's hard to get your head around and really figure out that it's where we really are at. So what I've got, what I call this message is, it's a perspective on God. And the first part of this is the Father. So we all know our Father in heaven. Am I okay there? Am I too loud? Good. So we go back to Matthew and 6, 9, 14, which is our Father in heaven. Now these words always intrigue me. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So it's always intrigued me that there's a whole lot in there. There's messages galore about that whole initial segment of the Lord's Prayer. And the Lord gave it to us. Jesus gave it to us. But what I want you to go to initially is, very simply, the first book of the Bible. So if you turn with me to Genesis 1, and these words have always intrigued me. Just hang on a moment. What's happening here? There you go. You should know what it is, Roland.
Tell us what it is.
Later. Got to keep the intrigue going, you see. Okay. So the first book of the Bible, in Genesis, says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Very simple. Very simple. But it's very hard to get your head around as to what this is all about. Are we talking about singularity? Are we talking about string theory here? Are we talking about multiple universes? What are we talking about from man's worldly perspective? And it goes on and describes a little bit about that. But it says here, under the firmament the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. So he divided the waters and the firmament above. And he said, and the God called the firmament heaven, with a capital H. So to me, that's always been intriguing to me. So God told me, lie on my back, look at heaven, get to know his universe. So that's what we started to do. So we've got Earth, we live here, somewhat precariously on this little planet. We seem to be attacking it more than encouraging to live on it. So anyway, it's part of what we're going through at the moment. You young guys have got an intriguing future ahead of you. Look after it, because it's a very special place. It's an enclosed system, and we all know what happens in a closed system. If you put too much rubbish into it, you get rubbish out of it at the end and can't survive. But anyway, let's just take you on a little bit of a tour of the universe, of what I've pictured my universe. Again, it's just a thin slither. We all might have different perspectives on it, but let's just take a little bit of a perspective on it. Now, for the mathematicians, who are a bit of a worry in this place at the moment, but anyway. Okay, we deal with a number of very basics. We deal with time, we deal with distance, we deal with 3 dimensions currently, and what we see, 4 dimensions really, because we've got time. We deal with the basics of how we measure things. Currently, what I'm going to talk about is the speed of light. Comes out roughly, very roughly, about 300,000 kilometres per second. So that light that's coming out of there is hitting me at 300,000 kilometres per second. It does have a bit of energy behind it, but that's another thing. So just to get it in perspective, if the sun went out, the time it would take for us to realise that the sun had actually gone out is actually 8.3 minutes. So light takes 8.3 minutes to come from the sun to Earth. Then gone. Rockets on behind us as well. What's really interesting as well, everything in God's world is moving, sometimes at incredible speeds. But we're pretty slow on Earth here. We're moving around the sun in our little orbit we've got here at about 30 kilometres per second. So every second, you count on your watch, we've travelled another 30 kilometres. That's quite fast. If we click on to the next one, please. That little beast there was launched by man. Some may recognise it, most of you probably won't, but it's the Voyager 1 probe that went down via Jupiter and down that way. It was launched on the 5th of September 1977. So that's quite a lot before a lot of people that are in this room here. That's roughly, mathematics here? Nah, you're lost. 44 and a half years ago it went. So it's a long time ago, and it's still going, and it just keeps on going. You hear about it every so often. But what's really interesting is that it's you can work on the mathematics at 3 times 10 to the 5 kilometres per second and figure out how distant it is. At the moment, it takes just on 22 hours for a radio signal travelling at the speed of light to go and reach that thing, this thing here. And then it takes another 22 odd hours for a signal to come back after it's processed. So it's a fair way away, knowing that the sun takes 8.3 minutes to get light here. So what's really amazing about this little spacecraft is, and I find it one of the most humbling things that I've seen that man has ever produced, and you don't hear about it that much as well. If you go on to the next slide, please. Now, it turned around back in 1990 when it was about 600,000 kilometres away and took this photograph, because very soon after that it couldn't see what it was taking a photograph of. Now that looks like a lot of fuzz and everything like that, but what I want you to focus on is that little blue dot just up there. That's the Earth from 600,000 kilometres. The photograph's called the blue dot, and to me that's just so humbling, just to see our little blue dot hanging in the middle of nowhere. Just extraordinary. I'll come back to that. But anyway, it's just quite amazing. That's who we are. That's where we are. Basically in the middle of nowhere. Almost in the middle of nowhere. But we've got to get your size increased. So we're now 600,000 kilometres away. What we're going to do now is go to the next slide. Now, that's familiar probably to a lot of people. That's the Southern Cross up there, and that's the 2 pointers. What's really neat though is that that's the constellation of Crux, the cross. To the left-hand star down there, a little brighter one, that's one of the pointers, and we call it Alpha Centauri. So it's a totally different constellation group. But that star there is close to us. In fact, our nearest star obviously is the Sun, but that one there is our nearest next door neighbour star. But the light from that takes 4.2 years to get to us. But what's intriguing, God put something rather intriguing right on our doorstep. What's intriguing about that star is that it's not just one star, it's actually 3. There's 2 big ones going around each other, so they circle each other. And then there's a third one that's way out, that circles the 2 of those. Now, if you know anything about orbital mechanics and things like that, it's really quite an interesting dynamic system. At the moment, the little sun is the one that's closer to us, not the two big ones, but it's still around about 4.2, 4.3 light years away. So God put something really interesting right on our doorstep to have a look at, to intrigue us. We can see quite easily with backyard telescopes if you know what you're looking at. Okay, let's just take it a bit further back out again. That's 4.2 light years. The other stars are different distances, but that just happens to be our closest one at the moment. There are others. On to the next slide, please. Okay, where's our place in the universe? Well, we sit in a little galaxy. We call it the Milky Way galaxy. We look out at night and see this little glow going between the sky. And it's another thing too, it moves rather fast. So looking at our galaxy, you can see where Earth is, where the sun system is there. It's on what they call the Orion spur. Now, there's a reason that it's a spur. When you see these lovely photographs of galaxies in books and things like that, they all look nice and even. But our galaxy is not, because it's been through the wars, it's been through some battles. But what's interesting is that the sun rotates around the centre of our galaxy somewhere around about, 200 kilometres per second. So you start to see that things are moving pretty fast as you get further away from the Earth. But the galaxy as a whole, that galaxy as a whole, is basically moving that way as a whole, 300 kilometres per second. So all the things are moving all over the place. Very fast. Now we get out a little bit further. So we move out a little bit further, out to millions of light years now. But if you go to the next slide, that tries to give a 3D perspective. So you look at the circle at the bottom and lift it up. We're looking at a 3D perspective. Our little Milky Way is sitting up there on the left. You can see from time to time at night our Magellan clouds. They're satellite galaxies around our own galaxy, but they are independent galaxies. What all those little bits around our own galaxy are leftovers of collisions. So our galaxy has been through the wars. It's actually got a bit of a ripple to it, and it produces quite a lot of noise in the radio frequency. But going from the Milky Way galaxy to our next door neighbour, galaxy-wise, so similar sort of size, is the Andromeda galaxy. Now we see that from time to time in summer, but there's about 2 million light years in between those two. So we're talking big distances here, and that's our next door neighbour. We're not too bad in the country because we're quite used to having neighbours, 10 kilometres down the road, or we're just going down the next door neighbours. So we can relate to this a little bit more than people in the city. But all it's trying to do is give a perspective on what's around there. So again, distance. Huge distances that we're talking about, and big gaps in between. There's all sorts of studies about dark matter and what it all is and stuff like that, but that's something completely different. Now, when we look at this, we sort of get in perspective, but if we turn around and look this way, go to the next slide, we have something what we call the Virgo cluster. Now, we're looking through a lot of our own galaxy as well, but if you start to look at that, you see little fuzzy blobs around here, not the stars, but elongated fuzzy blobs. They're all galaxies. That picture goes out currently to around about 10 million light years. So we're talking big distance, big distance. A lot of oddities in there, a lot of funny little things in there, but it's all just going out. It's in a very narrow tube heading out in one direction. There are other tubes heading in different directions. But there's a couple of little anomalies I want you to have a look at. First one, next slide. Okay, that one there, that's something that the Lord throws at us. It's not too far away from us. It's just under, I think about 700 or 800 million light years away. But in there, in that picture there, there's 3 galaxies colliding. So there's a lot of energy. God's got this all under control, believe me. Have a look at the next one. Now, this has just come out very recently. It's not been totally proven. It's called HD1. And apparently, that is the furthest galaxy they have found so far. The time base that they're putting on it is 13.5 billion years. Now, according to that same time base, That's about 300 million years after the Big Bang. So, where we go. It's all down the time basis. Okay, now, faster than the speed of light. It's another good, interesting one. We now go on to the next slide. We've come screaming back to Earth again. So now we're going to get into a slightly different picture of where God is at. So we've seen some of the biggest parts of what we can see at the moment of what God's universe is all about. It's a big place. God is big. And he permeates the whole of the universe. Everywhere. He's everywhere. But the amazing thing is, he wants to have a personal relationship with each of us. To me, that's just extraordinary beyond belief. When you start getting your head around that, to see, mate, this guy's pretty big. But he wants a personal relationship with each of us. And that's what I've found. So, let's just continue in another direction. Now, a lot of people that do this type of speech don't go the other direction. I'm going to go the other direction. So what we're going to do now is bury ourselves in the outback. Go down there and drill through and see where we're going. But from a different perspective. Let's have a look at the next slide. So we're now getting down to very small. We're getting down to the size of molecules. So this is what God uses as his building blocks for all of us, for everything, the whole lot, universe, everything. We've got molecules. That one there is a 5-base molecule. You can see a couple of fuzzy patches in a group of a 5, and then white fuzzy patches around it. That's what molecules look like. They're fuzzy looking things. Go to the next one. That's what an atom looks like. You've got different makeups there. A lot of people will be familiar with that. Other people won't be. But you've got protons, neutrons, you've got electrons go around the outside. So the dark patch was where the protons were, the fuzzy bits where the electrons go around. Okay, on to the next one. Now you should be familiar with that, Rolly. In fact, most of the women in here should be familiar with that. That's gold. What's neat about gold is that it's a very tight-fitting atom. That's a sheet of atoms of gold. And as you know, gold can be made very, very flat, very flimsy. It almost floats in the air. And that's why, because it can be made very flat. It's a very stable compound. It can't even oxidize. That's why gold stays like gold if it's pure gold. So that's a whole range of particles there. Basically just atoms of gold. You see there's a lattice work to it, a definite pattern to it. Now I'm going to really throw something at you which you may know about, may not know about, is atoms are made up of particles. Now we saw there was protons, neutrons, electrons. Man's been trying to figure out what the building blocks God uses to build everything. In other words, man wants that sort of knowledge to be more like God. Some people think they're God, but they're not. Okay? They still don't know. So go on to the next slide. That's really what makes us up. There's all sorts of things there. They're called elementary particles. When you get down to this sort of size, which is really, really small, our normal physics doesn't really count on things. These react and do things pretty differently. You've got quarks, don't worry about all the different names of them, but they're there. You've got leptons. You've got gauge bosons, and then you've got scalar bosons, and that's the latest one that was discovered about 10, 15 years ago. But they've got to build big things to discover these things. So what they did last time was they built what they called the Hadron Collider. This is in Switzerland. It's a big circular thing with big magnets, and you may have seen pictures and things like that, at a place they call CERN, which is the area where it is, on Switzerland-France border. Took them about 10 years to build it. Did an experiment which took probably less than a couple of months to set up and get going. And now they've turned it off because they've discovered what they want to discover. And there's billions of dollars from countries all around the world that put that into it. And all they discovered was the Higgs boson particle. But it proved the point. And that's what we do sometimes, is prove the point. But what I really want to get with this is that God's incredible. He's amazing. He's very big. And yet he controls the very small. And we still haven't figured out what the smallest particles are. From a mathematical point of view, we have some difficulties in exploring past what they call 10 to the minus 34. So it's a very, very small number. It's smaller than these things. We just can't seem to get past that point mathematically at the moment. We certainly can't experiment it. It's going to cost billions upon billions to try and build something to experiment about this thing. But we just can't get past it at the moment. So all I wanted to get through today within that short dissertation there is that God is very big and he controls the very small. But the real point is that he wants a personal relationship with all of us. Now, that's the practical part of it. Let's get into the spiritual part of it just for a few minutes and then I'll be over and done with. Won't take you too long. So if we turn to John, the Gospel of John, 1:1. Go flip through a few things here. Now, John was a rather interesting character. He was a Baptist. Just to let you know, he was a Baptist. I'll talk a bit more about John if I get the opportunity to chat again about this thing. But John was a very, very astute guy. He was a bushy, very, very interesting guy, background, everything like that. But he was a man born for a time, and he was a man. He wasn't God, he was a man. But he knew he was leading the way. And his first words in his gospel are the same words, or similar, to the words that are in the beginning of the Bible. So John said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now to me, I focus on that and look at the Word. So in other words, whatever we speak out of our mouths is something very powerful. A lot of people don't realise it, but what we speak out of our mouths is very, very powerful. And it says here, number 2, he was in the beginning with God. So he's starting to talk about Jesus there, and I won't go any further than that. But very interesting. Now, let's go back to the Old Testament, 1 Chronicles. Is there another slide beyond that? Yeah, let's go to that. It's easier. It's less mind-boggling. 1 Chronicles 16:26. Page. But it says here, I'll read the whole thing, but for all the gods of the peoples are idols. Now we've all got idols. Cars, telescopes I've got and other bits and pieces, and this little toy that I've got here. But it says here, but the Lord made the heavens. So, he made it. Simple as that. With all the stuff that I've shown you. Now it starts to get easier, progressive. Psalm 19:1. And it says here, the heavens declare the glory of God, and they do. Some of the photographs I've showed you here is just a smidgen of what you can look at in the heaven. They do declare the glory of God. No matter how people argue about it, what they do, they can't get their head around that it is just simply created by God. Now, what really disappointed me when I started to read the Bible in a bit more detail, if you go to Isaiah, Isaiah 65:17. Let's go there. And I've really talked to God about this and say, God, you can't do this to me. It's taken me my lifetime to get to know a little bit about the heavens. So 65:17 comes down here and it says to me, for behold, I love the word behold, by the way. I try to animate the Bible as much as I can, and I know I'm nuts, but I try to animate it as much as I can. Wherever I see behold, doesn't matter what punctuation's behind it, I always put an exclamation mark. So whenever I'm reading it and I see the word behold, I go, because it livens it for me. Just me. I know, I'm nuts, don't worry about it. So it says here, for behold, I create new heavens and a new earth. Oh, God, do you really have to do that? And we're just starting to get to know, improve the place, clean it all up, keep the heavens. They look really neat. Great photographs, fantastic. Earth looks pretty good, why not do that? Anyway, God's God. Now head towards 2 Peter. 2 Peter, towards the end. It's one of the last books in the Bible, if you don't know where it is. So just back from Jude, John, we get 1 Peter. 3:10. Where are we? 3. And it goes here. And it goes into, I've got the right one here. I'm looking for, everything will pass away. Heaven will pass away. 2 Peter, sorry, not 1 Peter. That's right. 3:10, yep. This page is stuck together. Okay, 3:10. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise. Now this intrigues me because you look up in the sky and you, especially out in the country, it's quite quiet. The heavens are quite quiet. But as I've shown you, there's a lot of violence out there, there's a lot of interaction, there's a lot of noise out there. And if you listen to a radio in certain frequencies, you can hear that noise. Up around 14,200, you hear a lot of noise from the sun, and other frequencies specifically hear noise coming out of heaven. So I can imagine the volume being turned up and there'd be great crashes coming through. So what have we got? If we go to Matthew now, pretty close to finishing, you're in the right place now. So go to Matthew. Matthew's the first book of the New Testament. Go to Matthew 3:16. Where are we? 3:16. Then Jesus, when he had been baptized, came up immediately from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened to him. Now that always intrigued me, because the heavens I've never seen open. Okay, we know rain comes out, but I'm talking about the firmament up in the top there. And he saw the Spirit of God. There's a whole message in this one too, but descending like a dove and alighting upon him. And suddenly a voice came from heaven saying, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." So the heavens appear to be able to be pulled apart. If you go to Matthew 24, just go for it, guys. Quiet in the back there. 24:29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened. Well, it takes some amazing power to do that. And the moon will not give its light. That means the sun is darkened. It's not just clouds, because the moon is by reflected light from the sun. So if the moon goes dark, that means everything's closing down. And will not give light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Wow. That's enormous to me. So God's got some amazing power. So there's other bits we can go into, other things from there. But look, at the end of the day, all I really wanted to get across is that God is big. God controls right down to the most tiniest thing that this universe is made of. All we want to do is just be open to God. He'll speak to you as much as he speaks to me. And if you want to talk to me about anything about God, if you want to talk about being born again, being in the life of the Lord, just give us a chat afterwards. But anyway, before I go, what's this? Now, Rolly, you know. Yes, you do. Those are gamma rays. Now, we live in a world where all sorts of strange things buzz through here, apart from radio signals, but these are gamma rays. Gamma rays some of them start on the ground here because we're in a granite belt area. Just decomposing granite produces gamma rays. But most of these things that you're beeping here and hearing are from outside the Earth, outside completely. They're from black holes, could be from the centre of our universe. They're from deteriorating stars. And these little gamma rays buzz around at the speed of light. Now they're rather destructive beasts because they have high energy. So every so often they pass through us, like this thing's there. It's passing through you and me about the same time. But these are just individual ones passing through this instrument. So it's a Geiger counter. So it's picking up different things. But these things are buzzing through us all the time. And this is what can knock out spacecraft, can knock out interesting things in our body from time to time. So we wonder why we do fail. But they're part of God's universe. Praise the Lord. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening. You want to chat about anything?